everybody, Alyne Hart here. Now, what we're going to be talking about today is how watching movies and television shows can help you improve your writing. Now, I know what you're saying right now, but Alyne, the books are always better than the movies, and that is true. But that doesn't mean that you can't use movies and television shows to help you improve your writing. So today I'm going to bring you 9 tips for how watching movies and television shows can help you improve your writing. So I had the idea for this not too long ago. I am kind of a movie junkie. I love sitting in my room and just vegging out and watching movies and just kind of unwinding from my day. So I was watching this movie a couple of months ago and I found it really interesting. So the movie takes place in one night and it's 2 characters with really no side characters and it only has kind of one plot. There's no subplots. It's literally just one plot, 2 people walking around New York City in the middle of the night having a conversation. By the end of the movie, I was so invested in it, I actually cried. And that got me thinking, how did this movie do that? How did it get me so invested in these characters and in this really singular plot line that I cried at the end? So I started doing some research because I love researching. And I started to learn that this is actually a thing. You can actually learn how to write better by watching movies and television shows. So I've read all kinds of things and sort of added my own things to it. And so here we go, 9 tips for how watching movies and television shows can improve your writing. So tip number 1 is creating realistic dialogue. Now, this is something that a lot of writers struggle with, how to create realistic, interesting dialogue that moves the plot forward and helps with character development. Watching movies is an excellent tool for this. If you take any writing course or read any writing books, they will tell you to study real dialogue. But unless you're a total creep just sitting in a coffee shop listening to other people's conversations, which I might have done a time or two, that watching movies and TV shows is a fantastic way to learn how to create real dialogue. So how do you do this? With every single one of these tips that I'm going to give you today, what I want you to do is pick one movie and watch one scene, and you're going to break everything down. So I want you to watch a movie and watch one scene and really focus on the dialogue. Focus on the back and forth. Focus on the things left unsaid. Focus on the pace and pattern of speech. Focus on facial expressions, body language, eye contact. What kind of natural pauses happen in between sentences? How long does someone take to think about what they're about to say, or do they just blurt it right out? All these things are really useful tools in learning how to create realistic dialogue. I think that it's hard for people because sometimes there's a lot of rules as to how we create the prose of our story. And those rules don't really apply to dialogue because what's going to end up happening is unrealistic and stilted dialogue and people complaining that the dialogue sounds forced or stiff, and that's really not what you want. So again, take that movie, break down the dialogue, focus on the back and forth, focus on the write down everything. Write down the facial expressions, the gestures, the body language, the posture, the pauses, how they look at each other, how long it takes before they say certain things. Recreate that point of dialogue from each person's point of view. So you could write the dialogue from a male point of view and then write it from a female point of view. And by studying these things, you're going to learn how to create more realistic and better paced dialogue. Tip number 2, opening scenes. Again, this is another thing that we as writers often struggle with. Where do we start our story? Now, everybody can tell you where to not start your story, such as waking up from a dream or standing in a mirror having an inner monologue. All these things are very cliche, and we've been told time and time again, don't open a story this way. But how do we know where to begin our story? Do we begin it with a flashback? Do we begin it in the middle of action? Where do we start a story? So again, by referring to movies and television shows and them showing us how they introduce us to the story, the main character, this is something that you can carry over into your writing. It's also a great way to learn how to create a good hook that keeps people interested because the first chapter, as we all know, is the most important chapter, and it's also exactly like the opening of a movie. So learning how a movie or television show creates that hook that keeps you interested to keep going is really, really important. Number 3, scene setting. Now, I've read a lot of books where the author doesn't exactly set the scene for me, and I have to kind of make one up in my head, but it might not exactly go along with what the author was trying to create. So, again, this is where referring to movies and television shows comes in handy. There's a word for it, and it's called mise en scène, and I probably just completely butchered that word since I don't speak French, and loosely and horribly translated, it means everything in its place on set. Everything in a movie and television show is important. The lighting, the scene, the background, the props, even the clothing and time of day are all extremely important to setting the mood that the director wants to portray. I want you to think about a scene in a movie where maybe the two characters are having a really pivotal conversation. It's a make or break conversation. And I want you to picture it on a dark city street, and the lights are sort of maybe, fuzzy and glowing behind them. There's cars driving back and forth. Maybe it's raining, it's really moody, and they're having this really intense conversation. Now, I want you to picture that exact same conversation on a sunny day in the middle of a meadow. How did the mood change there? And that's why scene setting is so important and often overlooked. So for this exercise, you're going to pick the movie and you're going to pick one scene. And I want you to write down everything. Trees, what the setting is, what the time of day is, what the light looks like, what kind of mood are they trying to create. Does the director zoom in first on, like, maybe they're in a bar and there's a glass of whiskey with that, sweat dripping down the sides of the glass? That's important. That is scene setting right there. Is someone's hand on a glass, but they never lift the glass to their lips? And maybe the reason why is because they're so into this conversation that the glass in their hand is the last thing on their mind. And all of these things are really, really important to setting a scene, setting mood, and setting tone in your stories. Number 4, pacing and structure. Now, we all know that terrible pacing can kill a book, movie, or television show. We've all watched movies or read books where it just took forever to get to the point. Maybe there was just nonsensical conversation or just things that were unnecessary that didn't drive the plot forward, didn't keep our interest, and it took forever to get to the meat of the story, and maybe we even stopped watching the movie or stopped reading the book. So if you think about a movie that has perfect pacing, it moves straight through the movie and all of a sudden it's just right over. That is great pacing. So here is what you do to study how movies are paced. When I started doing this, and it sounds really kind of bonkers, I wouldn't suggest doing this when you're having a movie marathon with your significant other or friends, but I want you to take a piece of paper and you're going to watch a movie and you're going to stop the movie at about 20 to 25 minutes in. At about 20 to 25 minutes in, we should have been introduced to the main characters and we should have already gotten to the plot hook or setup. So think about, how did they get from that opening scene to the plot hook, and write all that down. What happened from point A to point B to get us to know what's going to happen for the rest of the movie, to let us know what to expect, and to let us know kind of what we're in for when we get into the middle of the movie and to keep our interest. Next, you're going to stop the movie at about an hour to an hour and 15 minutes in, depending on the length of the movie. This should be the meat of the movie, just like it would be the meat of your book. The middle of your book is what your story is all about, but it's often what writers struggle with the most because there's so much stuff to fill. So if you think about a movie, how did they fill that big chunk of their movie? Because it's exactly the same. What kind of scenes happened? What kind of conversations happened? What did we learn about the characters? What did we learn about their drive and what it is that they actually want in life? And then I want you to think about what happened in the middle of that movie that drove us to the climactic moment. Like, what were the steps that took you there naturally so that when the climax hit, you're like, holy crap, what's going to happen? And then at the end of the movie, study what happens after the climactic moment to get to the happily ever after, the happy for now, which is so common in movies these days, or even just the ending. How did they get from climax to that? Because it shouldn't just be an immediate thing. The climax happens and all of a sudden everyone's happy, all is forgiven. How did that happen? How did that naturally happen? And how was it satisfying or even dissatisfying to you? Number 5, creating mini cliffhangers. Now, this is a trick that I absolutely love, and I actually started talking about it in one of my videos previously, and I realized it was something that I wanted to expand on further, and this one seemed like the absolute perfect time to do. So think about a TV show, and everyone has a favorite TV show, and you know that moment right before a commercial hits, and maybe a bomb is about to be dropped, or someone has a realization, or a kiss is about to happen. Something happens, and it's that pan out moment where everyone's like, and then a commercial happens. And the point of that is to either A, make you sit through the commercials so that you don't miss the beginning of the, coming scene, or two, you rush off, you go to the bathroom, you get your snacks, you get your drinks, whatever you need to do, so you can rush back and sit down before it starts so you can find out what that big moment was all about. You can do the exact same things in your books. About the last time you read a book and you sat down and you said, I'm going to read 2 chapters, and then it's 2:30 in the morning and you read the entire book. I guarantee what that author did was create little mini cliffhangers at the end of each chapter to keep you turning those pages. And you'll know that this is happening when you look at your own reviews, and they often will say, I couldn't put this book down once I started. I only meant to read X amount, and then I stayed up all night because I had to finish it. Creating mini cliffhangers is a great way to keep those pages turning, and they can be really subtle. Often in my books, I will use sometimes maybe a kiss that's about to happen, or a romantic scene that's about to happen, a conversation that needs to happen, a secret being revealed, anything where I can just kind of drop it right there and then move on to the next chapter. So as you're writing, look for those moments. Look for those tiny moments where you know it's something that people are going to be waiting for to happen. And then that's where you end your chapter and then move on to the next one. And then you'll be creating little mini cliffhangers, and you'll start seeing it in reviews that someone sat down to read your book and they couldn't stop once they started. Number 6, the passage of time. Now, a lot of times, and I see this a lot in writer groups that I'm in, is people don't know how or where to end a scene or how to end a chapter. So by studying movies and how they transition smoothly from scene to scene, will teach you how to create flow in your own books. How do they create a passage of time? How do they show, maybe we're moving from one day to the next? Because we don't see our character wake up and roll out of bed and brush their teeth and make a bowl of Cheerios and then comb their hair and get dressed and go out for the day, and everybody they bump into along the way and maybe getting a tank of gas. That would be the most boring thing you could ever do. So how do you transition from day to day or scene to scene smoothly and naturally? And that's where studying movies and learning, or even television shows, and seeing how they transition naturally and smoothly from scene to scene and how that pushes a story forward will really help you in your writing. Number 7, character development. Now, this is a good one to refer to a television show for. So I have a favorite television show, and there's a character who at the beginning of the season is very unlikable. You might even call her a bit of an antagonist. She's nasty and rude and snotty and selfish. But by the end of the first season, she's actually very empathetic. You feel for her. You kind of have a deeper understanding of maybe why she is the way she is. And what those writers did was take advantage of the time to fully develop that character. Now, learning how writers develop characters in movies and television shows will show you how to not info dump in that first chapter or two and give way too much backstory that's really not relevant or pertinent at the time, because you want people to know who your character is right away. But the truth is that maybe keeping things hidden a little bit and dishing out little bits at a time is way more important to developing a character than dumping all the information right at first. I will tell you that one of my favorite things, and this is really crazy, is when I see in my reviews or when people email me or DM me on Facebook and they're like, I hated this character, I didn't want to like this character, and then by the end I fell in love with them. And I like that. Now, of course, I don't like that they hate my character, but what happened was I set up my character and slowly dished out bits of information, slowly dished out bits of personality, so that by the end of the book, you felt more empathetic and you understood why that character made the choices that they made. And that's exactly what television and movie writers do with their characters too. Number 8, watch terrible movies. Now that sounds crazy, but it's really easy to just say, I didn't like that movie. Okay, well, think about why you didn't like that movie. Were the characters underdeveloped? Were they unlikable? Was the conversation weird? Was the pace too slow? Was the plot thin or unbelievable? By being able to break down and decipher why you don't like things will actually help you improve your writing. When you figure out why things are unlikable, or why a certain book or story or plot or character didn't work, you can then avoid these mistakes in your own writing. So yes, I'm advising you to watch terrible movies and television shows. And number 9, watching movies and television shows to get ideas. And now I know what you're thinking. I can't copy other people's ideas. You're not copying other people's ideas. In most genres, there are tried and true tropes. In romance, there's the bad boy and the good girl. There's opposites attract. There's billionaires. I could go on and on and on. There are tried and true tropes, and that's the exact same with movies and television shows. They are based on tried and true tropes. So I'm not saying to sit down and copy a movie. What I'm saying is sometimes you can get little bits of things that pique your interest. Maybe it's even a side character who you think, gosh, that person's really interesting. I could really develop that character. And I know the first time I had that idea was when I was watching Grey's Anatomy, and I love me some Dr. Sloan. All my Grey's Anatomy lovers out there, can you not tell me that Dr. Sloan is probably one of the hottest characters on the show? It's his attitude, it's that swagger, it's that whole alpha male thing that he has going on. So why couldn't you take that character type and put it into your own story? Sometimes by watching movies and television shows and putting your own spins on it, thinking about how you could change things, what you would be doing differently, that will help just sometimes get those creative juices flowing a little bit. There's a great website that I like to use called tvtropes.com, and I learned this from J.A. Huss, who is bow to my queen. I love her. She turned me on to tvtropes.com, and you can get yourself lost in there for hours. And by going through all the tropes and characters and situations, it really helps get those ideas going, get those story ideas flowing, get them down on paper, and just kind of turn them into your own thing. The truth is, there's not a lot of really novel ideas out there, and we all put our own little flavors and our own little spins on things. If you and I were given the exact same plot with the exact same characters, I guarantee that what we both wrote would be a completely different story, because everybody has their own way of doing things and they have their own way of telling a story, and that's what makes tried and true tropes unique for each writer. Okay, so I hope that everybody found this video helpful, and I really want you to, next time you're watching a movie or a TV show, really take time to break it down and figure out why it works and why it doesn't work. Take an afternoon to watch a few movies and break down some scenes and really get in the habit of learning how to set scenes and develop characters and write realistic dialogue, and all these things are really, really going to help you. So if you liked today's video, please give me a thumbs up, hit that subscribe button and the notification bell, and I will see you guys next week.